Chapter 13. The Secret Cave. Side by side, Bob and Pete floated in the water about 5 feet from the bottom. Bubbles went up from their breathing tubes in little clusters. A school of sea bass wriggled past them and disappeared into the black opening the boys were staring at. It was not a big opening, perhaps only 12 feet wide by 4 or 5 feet high. It was shaped roughly like an eye, a dark, staring eye without any eyeball. The sides were smooth from the water currents that went in and out with the tides, and though there was seaweed nearby, none grew in the opening of the underwater cave. 20 feet to one side, Chris's sunken sailing boat bobbed a little, but Bob and Pete weren't interested in the sailing boat at the moment. They were engrossed in this underwater cave Chris had found. Each of the boys now had one of the waterproof flashlights in his hand, and in a minute, as soon as they got up their nerve a little more, they were going to swim into the cave and explore it. According to Chris's story, there was no danger. He had been unable to find his compass on the sandy bottom of the bay. However, just as he was about to surface, he had seen the mouth of the underwater cave. Thinking of possible treasure inside, he impulsively swam in. The cave seemed to get bigger as he went. It was dark, but he could look back and see the light spot which was the opening, and he kept that behind him. He had just decided to turn back when he realized that in his excitement he had gone farther than he should. He didn't have the breath enough to get outside and up to the surface. "I sure am one scared fish then." Chris had grinned when he came to this point in his story. "I know my only chance is to go ahead. Maybe cave will get big and I can come out for air. I swim like crazy. Then I see a little bit of light ahead of me. I swim that way and then I come up and I have air to breathe. I breathe hard. Then I look around. I'm in a cave under the island. A hole going up through the rocks lets in enough light to show me a rocky ledge covered with seaweed. I climb out to rest. My hand touches gold piece under seaweed. I get very excited. I look under all the seaweed for more gold, but cannot find any. Then I swim out to get you." An underwater cavern with pirate treasure in it. If Chris could swim into it without any scuba equipment, Pete and Bob could certainly do it with the modern aqualungs they had borrowed from Jeff Morton. It didn't sound dangerous. They could certainly take a quick look anyway. As the boys hesitated at the entrance to the cave, a white body swam between them. It was Chris. Waving to them, he shot like an arrow into the dark mouth of the cave. With one accord, they followed. The twin beams of their flashlights gave excellent illumination in the clear water. On either side rose the rocky walls of the cave, heavily fringed with seaweed. Startled fish scurried past. A green moray eel poked its heavily fanged head out of a crevice in the rock, and the boys gave it a wide berth. Chris was out of sight, swimming much faster than they. They had to be careful not to rub against the side of the passage, lest it damage or pull off some of their scuba equipment. Pete shone his light upwards. Suddenly the top of the tunnel vanished. The boys swam quickly up, 20 feet, 30 feet. Abruptly their masked faces popped out of the water. They were in a sizable cavern with a rough ceiling 4 or 5 feet above their heads. Chris was sitting on a rocky ledge, dangling his feet in the water. The two boys paddled over and climbed cautiously up beside him on the slippery seaweed. They pushed up their face masks. "We are inside the hand now," Chris said to them. "How do you like my cave?" "Golly," Bob said fervently. "I'll bet nobody but us has ever been in here." He flashed his light around. The cavern was irregularly shaped, the roof varying from 4 to 6 feet above the water. Down towards the far end, the cave narrowed sharply. However, there was a splash of daylight there, which puzzled them for a moment. They shut off their flashlights to study it, and in the gloomy half-light, the cave began to seem much bigger, eerie and mysterious. The eddying water made little gurgling noises against the rock, and strands of seaweed rose and fell like the floating hair of some mysterious underwater creature. "There must be a hole in the rocks going up to the surface," Bob said, puzzled. "The spout!" Chris exclaimed. "It's that hole, the blowhole. In storm, water comes in here, rushes against rocks, and shoots up spout. Only nobody knows there is a cave down here. Think it is just a narrow crack some place down deep." "Sure, that's it!" Bob cried. He remembered how they'd seen the water spouting up from the middle of the island during the storm 2 nights before. And of course, his notes mentioned the spout as something the very first explorers had discovered. Now they had found what caused it, something no one else had ever done. "Oh," Bob's face fell, and the others looked at him inquiringly. "I just thought of something," he said. "If we're the first people ever to find this cave, there can't be any pirate treasure hidden in it." "I didn't think of that," Pete groaned. "How do we know?" Chris demanded. "I find one gold piece, don't I? Let me have the flashlight and I dive down and see." Bob gave him a flashlight and Chris slipped into the water. In the darkness they could see a dim glow of light as Chris swam down to the sandy bottom. "It sure would have been nice if this had been a secret pirate hiding place no one had found before," Pete said. "But you're probably right, Bob." They watched the glimmer of light below them move back and forth. Chris could certainly stay down a long time. It must have been 2.5 minutes before the light went out. An instant later, Chris's head popped out of the water. Pete turned on his light, and Chris climbed up next to them. "You are right," he said in a gloomy voice. "No treasure down there, just crabs, fish, shells, like this." He opened his clenched fist. In it lay 2 gold doubloons. "Wow!" Pete and Bob whooped together. "Chris, where were they?" "In sand," Chris said. They passed the gold pieces eagerly from hand to hand. They felt wonderfully heavy and valuable. "Now we got 3, Chris said, eyes shining. "1 each." "No, you found them," Bob said. "They're yours." "Share equal," Chris said stubbornly. "Now you go down. Maybe you'll find more. Maybe enough to buy me a new boat and take good care of my father." Eagerly, Bob and Pete adjusted their faceplates, made sure their breathing tubes were in working order, and slid into the water. The sandy bottom was dotted with shells. As they turned their lights this way and that, they saw nothing unusual. Then Pete spotted a shiny glint at the edge of the rocky wall. It was a gold doubloon, half buried in the sand. Bob swam back and forth over the bottom with easy kicks of his flippered feet. A few minutes later, he spotted a shiny object, partly hidden beneath an empty oyster shell. It too was a doubloon. Excitement overwhelmed both boys. There really was pirate treasure in this underwater cave. Not handily stacked up in a nice solid chest, maybe, but scattered over the bottom. There must be more, and they would find it. Heedless of the passage of time, they scoured the sandy bottom. They turned over oyster shells, making clouds of sand in the water and then having to wait until it cleared to search some more. When they had found 6 gold doubloons each, their hands were too full to hold any more. Bob tapped Pete and they swam up and clambered out of the water. Exultantly, they poured their golden find onto a flat spot on the ledge. "We found some," Bob said excitedly. "Chris, you're right. There is treasure in this cave." Smiling, Chris reached behind him and produced 3 more doubloons. "I find these on ledge under the seaweed," he said. "I'll bet there's more," Bob said. "I don't know where it came from, but if we found this much, we ought to be able to find some more." "You've convinced me," Pete said. "Come on, let's keep on looking." Treasure fever makes it impossible for a person to think of anything else, and the 3 boys certainly had treasure fever now. Heedless of time or any other consideration, they began to search the underwater cave. They swam along the bottom inch by inch and explored every crevice of the rocky cave. Even as they hunted, however, something was happening that they couldn't possibly guess. Chris's sunken sailing boat, nudged by the underwater currents, was being wedged into the eye-shaped mouth of the cavern. There it stuck, sealing up the entrance like a cork in a bottle. The three boys were trapped in an underwater cave that nobody knew existed.